And so we come to our concluding session. And this is a really important discussion. I'm going to be chatting to some of our regulators from the Department of Agriculture who are responsible for the current legal framework that covers honey sold in South Africa and honey imports. We're also going to be looking to the retailers. So I'm going to be chatting to the Consumer Goods Council to understand what is their response to the adulteration of honey sold in South Africa. As we bring it to a close, it's really important to not just think of what we've looked at, but more importantly, to discuss the steps going forward, because we have to change the situation. We have to make a difference to the honey industry. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. We really appreciate your input at the SABIO Honey Fraud event, and thank you for agreeing to answer some of our questions. So I'd like to start with you, Salamina, if you don't mind. Thank you so much for being here. You're very passionate about beekeeping in South Africa. And what's the reason for this? Why are you so passionate about the bee industry being ethical and sustainable?
Thank you, Linda. I'm surprised myself how I got into beekeeping, but it started way back when I worked for the Directorate Inspection Services. And I got invited to the BeeCon, their conferences. And later on, I was then responsible for the inspection directorate, the sub-directorate responsible for enforcement of the legislation. That's where I started to interact with the industry. And from there, we once had a workshop for the beekeepers, which was very successful. And in that workshop, I met a whole lot of very interesting individuals, the young and old. I met men and women in agriculture, in the beekeeping sector, and very interesting young women who are very passionate about that. And that made me to realize how important the industry is, and those that needed support, not really funding, but just that support, knowledge, capacity, and so forth. And one good example, after the workshop, in a period of 2 weeks, because the president of the Apimondia attended, there's a lady, Tomi Mogu. She developed so much interest that she decided to attend an Apimondia symposium in Ethiopia in a period of 2 weeks. And when she came back, gave us the feedback. Wow, it was so interesting how the small-scale beekeepers, how they are doing in Ethiopia. So that really made me think and say, why should we not give them the support? And that's where my interest in beekeeping started. I'm not an expert, I'm just a public servant servicing the public. Yes.
Great. Well, I'm sure you've got some key projects that you want to unveil shortly, and I'm sure that at least one of those involves bees, but we'll keep it that secret for now. We'll come back to that because we have to talk about the regulation. You mentioned that previously you were involved with the inspection services. So Neil, you have the honor of writing many of these regulations. Now, as I understand that the honey grading regulation was published in the year 2000. So we're looking at a 20-year-old regulation, R835. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, it's a little bit outdated, as I understand. There's some concerns with regards to the grading requirements, the labeling requirements. We've heard today that there may be new testing methodologies which are not yet incorporated into the honey regulation. What is the feedback that you've been getting from the industry with regards to updating this regulation, and what are the plans?
Honey is a biological product, so the composition can vary because of factors such as climate and the type of crop and so on. So it's very difficult to set analysis for one type of standard for honey. we must look at the whole spectrum of compositional requirements. The latest Codex standard was updated in 2019, and it covers all the compositional requirements and testing methods thereof as in the previous Codex standards. And since the South African regulations were based on that one, it also includes all those the same compositional requirements. Now, a difference that came in with a revision of a Codex standard, it accommodates various exceptions. As I mentioned, that is a biological product, your composition will vary. So, where honey from certain plants and climates differ from the standard composition, Codex now accommodates now those differences. And that's not in our present regulations. And the grading is unique to the South African regulation. It's not in Codex, so it's a South African requirement, choice grade, and so on. And Codex differs also in that there are differences in labeling. They can do labeling according to the extraction methods. That's also not in our regulations. So from that viewpoint, yes, we agree that it can be updated and to be in line with Codex, but these special analysis methods and so on, they're not really in Codex. So that we will have to look at a later stage, or when it's more refined, that we can incorporate it in the regulations. Or if you go outside the regulations, you can also use it. You don't always have to use the test methods and the compositional standards that's in the regulations. You can for fraud and so on, you can go outside the regulations as well.
Sure. I think so. So what I'm hearing you saying is that the first priority will be to bring our outdated regulation in line with the new Codex requirements. That will definitely be the first priority from the department, and then secondly, then to look at perhaps additional testing methods. I think a concern could be that if you use the regulation as the basis for a purchasing contract, and there's a dispute when it comes to an analytical method, often it's the regulation that is used as the standard. Well, the regulation says this, so that's the testing method that we have to use. So I can understand that could cause, some concern to industry if the regulation has not kept up with the latest testing technology. Matlau, we've heard today that there is potentially honey in the market that could be adulterated. And we've heard from a number of speakers, we've looked at a number of sets of data that shows that there is unfortunately honey in South Africa that is not authentic. Is this something the CGCSA is aware of?
Thank you, Linda. Indeed, as an industry association, we have to be at the forefront of things that could impact the industry, because any fraudulent activity impacts the full value chain. It affects the farmers, it affects the processors, it affects the retailers. So we're sitting at that position to say we need to have a holistic view. And it is quite saddening that those activities are happening. And as the CGCSA this year in particular, food fraud is something that we are going to be embarking on in order to educate, so that we can come up with measures in place, so that we can recommend to regulators to say, maybe as an industry, we have looked at this and we need to put this as part of the legislation. So I am glad that the regulators are actually looking at reviewing the full regulation, so that we can really pin down on these fraudulent activities. And food fraud is at the top of our agenda as the Consumer Goods Council.
Now, we've heard that honey is one of the products that is possibly adulterated. It's on the top 10 list worldwide. So it's a serious problem, not just within South Africa. But Neil, if I ask you, is it really possible that we could, dilute honey with other syrups and it could still comply with our current legal requirement?
No, I don't think it's possible. we had such cases in the past, and we picked it up via enforcement and analysis. To be able to adulterate honey to such extent that you won't be able to pick it up would be, the people that must do it would have to have a lot of knowledge to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've had complaints like this where you've had to take product off the shelf that has been, potentially adulterated?
Yeah, in the past we had cases like that. But we can also use other detection methods,
Yes.
provided that they are based on sound science and are reliable, and they must reflect the South African honey composition.
Yes.
Now, I think the previous speakers told us about those tests that they are busy with.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. So I think there are a range of test methods, and what we're finding from the other speakers is that we definitely are identifying product that has been adulterated. I just wondered whether the department has actually had any reports of this, and what action has been taken in the past. Salamina, you've been involved with Epimondia for a number of years. As an international organization, they have a standpoint on honey fraud. Do you think that this is an issue within South Africa, within our region? I mean, what's your experience been? You've been involved for a number of years.
Yes, it's actually a continental and regional issue. I know from the regional commission, the president responsible for the office in Africa, they have now established a regional working group that is for that reason going to address issues of adulterated honey. Yes, and Professor Robin Crew, he's the one who is the convener for that working group. So it is one of the burning issues in the region, also at continental level. So,
do you think, Matlau, that the enforcement of the regulation is partly to blame for the situation that we're in? We do have an outdated regulation, but what about the enforcement? Because if the regulation still allows us to identify problems with honey, why are we not finding these things? Is there a problem in that regard?
I think there's a saying that before you point at the other side, look at your side. I think as the value chain, as the people that have committed to bring this product on the table of the consumers, we need to take that responsibility and do the right thing. So we always pride ourselves as having food safety management systems in place, having technological means to ensure that what we exchange as the value chain is proper, and it will be what we say we are giving to the consumer. So in servicing the consumers, we need to work together. We need not only say it is enforcement. We know government might have challenges in terms of laboratories are expensive. To put them together, to accredit them, it's quite expensive. So that is where we, as the sector, we always say, how can we work together so that we can find common ground and so that we help each other? Because if South African honey is flourishing like Manuka honey in your New Zealand and Australia, that is a market for South Africa to even take it outside, because it will be a reliable product. So we need to say government needs to do their part, yes, and also industry needs to do their part and put measures in place to ensure that what we put on the table of the consumer is what we had intended to put.
Now, I think one of the challenges that we have, Neil, on the label is a product of which country. So, I mean, I've seen honey labels that have got a product of and or South Africa and or Argentina and or, Poland. I mean, is that really allowed on our labels? Does the regulation allow for multiple countries and for the label to kind of change depending on the season?
Okay, locally, when you source honey, you can source it from blue gum honey or sunflower honey. But you don't have to sell honey according to that source. So what happens locally is the people are selling it as honey, and when what they do is they blend this honey to obtain a certain taste and color and profile that they want. And then they just sell it as honey. Now the same applies to imported honey. So if you need a certain profile, then you can blend it into South African honey, or imported honey can also blend it together. Regarding the indication of a country of origin, from the department side, we strive to harmonize our labeling with that of the Department of Health. So we gave permission to the industries, or various industries, where our country of origin indication is not the same as Department of Health. Department of Health labeling regulations allow you to indicate different countries, more than one, and say and or. This is mostly for single product agricultural ingredients, and one important issue is that it must be due to unavailability, due to climatic, seasonal, and other contingencies. So meaning that in winter we don't have enough honey and we have to import. The poultry industry indicated that requirement was misused. Because the people indicated 8 countries.
Yes.
So the industry came to us and said, but you know, what they are doing is not due to climatic, seasonal, and other contingencies. So we removed them from this permission.
Okay.
Now, if honey can be treated the same way, the industry can also approach us to remove them. The problem with honey is that it must be irradiated, imported honey. So,
I understand, so
that
yes.
has influenced the labeling when you say and or.
Absolutely.
And then there's also another issue is that South Africa is a net importer of honey, while that is different from the poultry industry.
Yes, okay. So I think there's definitely a couple of, I almost want to say loopholes, you know, where we can possibly have exploitation of honey as a result of the regulation. One last question, Neil, if you don't mind, then I'm coming back to the ladies. When it comes to labeling a product that is, for example, a honey-flavored syrup. So we've heard today that it's possible to adulterate honey with syrup, and it still tastes like honey, it still looks like honey. What if I decided to be just honest, an honest Joe, and make a syrup but add a honey flavoring to that? Could I sell that product as a honey-flavored syrup?
The regulations prohibit the use of the word honey on an imitation product. So even if it contains honey, it may only be indicated in the ingredients list. However, if you mix honey, not flavoring, real honey and syrup, you can present it like that. You can say it's a honey and syrup mixture.
Yes.
In the same letter type and size, not to mislead the consumer. So when you tell the consumer exactly what it is.
So I can't say honey and syrup.
No.
Okay, that's important because again, I think it's an opportunity where the consumer can be misled, you know, by labeling. Right, Salamina, let's come back to, you know, your vision for beekeeping in rural areas, improving market access for these emerging beekeepers. What's your big picture? What's your blue sky project?
Not really. Of course, yes, the survival of the agricultural sector, it is highly dependent on the honeybees through cross-pollination. And as the department, we recognize the bees and as very important. And for that, we encourage and promote that we have to conserve and preserve the bee forage. And currently, we are working very closely with the community, with the provinces and the municipalities for making efforts that communal and smallholder farmers engage in beekeeping as an alternative source for livelihoods. And we are all aware that, especially during this period, since the pandemic, the demand for the honey has spiked, both locally and internationally. So people are using honey for different purposes, medical reasons, others to substitute sugar, milk product, and so forth. So South Africa has the ability, the demand is there. It means there's market. The market is very massive. So the support from both the department, especially at province and district level, we encourage, because that is where the implementation and the support comes from. So we really, we can confirm that the market is there. And we have to come in as the regulator just to advise and bring to say, for the smallholder, they need some education, knowledge, capacity, just to make them aware, to say, once you are in the beekeeping industry, these are the processes and steps to follow. You need to be registered with the Department of Agriculture. Okay. If you are not registered, your farming is illegal. So if anyone find your beehives not marked, it means it's illegal, it might be destroyed. So it is important for all of us to know, and that will help us to know how many beekeepers we have, and it can also give us the stats, how much honey are we producing, because currently the honey that we produce vis-a-vis the honey that we import, there's potential in South Africa, but we don't have enough beekeepers. So it is important for us as the department, especially at local and provincial and local level, to support and encourage our beekeepers. And we get the support from the Apimondia Commission. They are very supportive. You've mentioned that there's what are we doing? Already they've identified Vhembe district as strategically positioned.
Okay.
There's a pilot project that is running. It came about from the regional commission and the concept to say, then it supports the young. It's actually a youth project. Oh, and then also supporting the young women and men, those kind of projects that will encourage and try to promote beekeeping in South Africa. So Limpopo province, I'm not promoting them, but they are really doing well so far.
Oh, that's
and also the department is very supportive. They accepted that proposal, and we hope it's going to, and once it's successful, we will then roll it over to other provinces. Yes.
Oh, that sounds amazing. But now I'm sure that the next question is going to be, I've got so much honey, can I sell it to the retailers? So Matlawi, you get lots of those phone calls where you've got an aspiring, manufacturer, processor, grower, in this case of, with honey. How do we channel them into the formal market, and how can we actually support them in their authenticity programs? We have the FSI. How can the FSI support an emerging beekeeper to ensure that they produce a safe and authentic product?
Where do you even start? The food industry is a pack of regulatory points that come from all over. But let me paint this scenario. If you are in a farm, you need to know what is coming from the other side and where you are going, so that the linkages talk to each other. And fortunately for honey, if you are not perfecting the skill of doing fraudulent things, it is just honey. You will put it out of the process. So there's minimal interaction with the product, unlike the other ones, because I want to bring the issue of traceability.
Absolutely.
Which then talks to the GS1 standards, that is a division of the CGCSA. Normally people know them as people that issue barcodes, but there is more to that in terms of the standards that you can follow. I was just reading an article yesterday on how New Zealand has helped the bee sector in terms of tracing, so that they can protect the Manuka name, so that each and every hive that you have as a producer needs to be identifiable, and it needs to be identifiable at a point where you are farming. And that links to what the regulators are saying. Your FBO needs to be registered. All of those minor details, you put them in and document them somehow, so that when you take all of the details and how you are farming, the process in terms of food safety, how you package them, and your labeling will be sorted by the department. That is how you get to access the market. You need to showcase you have done your work. Here I am. I comply to all of those details, and I can assure you. And what is nice is that with traceability, you need to monitor still, as we do on the food safety side, the critical control points. So you need to know where could anything go wrong. So if you identify, and I like this, honey is brilliant, because there isn't much that you need to monitor and in terms of what you're doing. And in terms of traceability, once you showcase that you are complying in terms of labels, which you can reach out to various associations. I'm sure Sabio also does that service, and the CGCSA does that, to get the support, and the division that Salamina is sitting at, they can help you with getting your labels ready. You get your barcode, because that is very critical. Retailers don't want to sit at a point of sale and the beep is not coming. You need to professionalize the label that you have, so that it's efficient, it goes out quickly. That is the business, how they run. So once you have all of those packaged, and help is available, that is why we are here to talk about them, so that you can professionalize yourself, you can be identifiable, and if you pass all of those, it should be easy to get. And in any way, government is talking about localization. They've reached out to the business to say, let's localize, let's buy local. And anyway, buying local is lekker. So we can only influence people to say, reach out to the departments. They know who to link you up with, and we work together in that relation to support the SMMEs and whoever that's farming, and get them into the markets.
Absolutely. Let's see if we can get more South African honey on South African shelves. And let's make sure that it's authentic South African honey. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.